Greetings, everybody. Today's topic is, what is the relationship between fat in our foods and our heart health? This is a subject that's very near and dear to my life because who am I? I'm Ed Jones, nutrition world. I spent 46 years professionally in the field of nutrition, and I have also been very privy to following 10,000 plus individuals over a period of many years of their life, because they share all of their information with me, their habits, their choices, their foods, their nutraceuticals. And I am very blessed to be able to connect the dots when I look backwards on all of the people that I've seen age gracefully. Some of them have done poorly. Many do much better than the average because they're seeking information. And that's one of the parts of my complexity is I have been an amazingly strong seeker of truth. And I surround myself with what I speak of as very wise people in the field of health. Knowledge is different than wisdom, and I do value knowledge, but there's sometimes people who are very knowledgeable actually make very poor decisions because they don't have the ability to take a bigger step back and look at the bigger picture that requires wisdom. Well, there's a whole lot of information, misinformation on, does eating fat make our heart less healthy? Well, back in about 1946, there was a person named Ansel Keys. He was an American physiologist.
Hello there.
And he created a new ideology of the concept that fat is killing us. Cholesterol is damaging our arteries. And it was a real turn in history because before that, there was no conversation of any relationship between fat and heart disease. And in fact, 1800s, there was very little heart disease. But once the revolution of food changes and factory foods came into the picture, and what we're going to talk about, seed oils started being made within the complex of manufacturing food, all of that changed to a point of we now, 80% of us will die from cardiovascular disease, strokes, and clots and heart disease and heart attacks, 80% of us. So it is something we need to think about. And I saw this copy here from Time magazine in 1984, the cover, Time, cholesterol with a very sad face. Well, 2014, Eat Butter was the next one. And obviously there's a lot of information that is confusing regarding cardiology and physicians and traditional health models that are still recommending to eat certain ways. And what has happened, in my opinion, is it is this low-fat craze, which started in about 1975, is when all the manufacturers decided to jump on the bandwagon of, we're going to create a new class of foods called low-fat. And for those who did not live through that era, it was everywhere. I'd say half of the foods that were packaged or contained or canned or this and advertising low-fat everything. Well, that was, other than Ansel Keys' big plug against fat, this was a secondary part that has destroyed the health of this country. Why? Because when you lower fat, one thing happens. You raise carbohydrates. We have created an addictive nation to carbohydrates. Once you start eating tons of those, even if they're healthy, you start having cravings for these carbs. And that's why we have about a 42% of our country is obese. And it's not looking any better for the future, despite all the Ozempic stuff, because that's only going to be a short run. It's not fixing the underlying issue. So when we deal with, okay, fat, is it healthy, is it not? Well, you know, I love the old Clint Eastwood movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And the title is exactly what I want to talk about with fats. First off, cholesterol. We're going to talk about cholesterol, carnivore diets, keto, but all of that goes back to, what impact will that have on my longevity, my health, my appearance? One of the first bullet points I want to say is I have a deep, close relationship to healthy fat in my diet. I take olive oil with me at every single lunch that I go into because restaurants will not have quality olive oil. 80% is diluted with really bad oils. Heavily into organic butter, tallow. I focus on having heavy fat in my diet because when we have a lot of cholesterol. Guess what? Cholesterol is not the undertaker's cousin like we've all been led to believe. Cholesterol is vital for our brain chemistry, one. Two, it is the backbone of steroids, the estrogens, the testosterones, the adrenal hormones. The body needs it in order to produce these. And cell membranes. The cell membranes are like the gateway that allows the good stuff in and the bad stuff to go out. Well, this gateway is built by healthy fats, and cholesterol is one of those healthy fats. One of the studies long ago was looking at rabbits, and they gave them eggs and cholesterol foods and did autopsies and found all their arteries were clogged. And that really set another stage for some of this misinformation. Rabbits don't eat those foods. They have a different metabolism than us. So it really didn't apply. And I'm going to explain to you why when you go and you get a blood test and they say, oh, your cholesterol's too high or your LDL is too elevated and you need to take a statin drug, of what you really need to consider with that statement. And I've used this analogy one single time in some of my talks, but when we're told the same thing over and over, sometimes telling something that's untrue enough times, then we start believing it. It becomes kind of ingrained into our pattern of belief. And I know that I thought of this, that, chiggers. We probably all had an episode where we got chigger bitten. Well, more than 50% of the people still believe that chiggers burrow into the skin, and that if you put fingernail polish on them, it suffocates them. Complete untruth. I will never live long enough for the society to realize that one is completely false. Well, the same has been true with, we need to eat vegetable oils. We need to eat canola and safflower and sunflower, because the studies, they say, show that if we can lower, or you can lower LDL, which is a part of the cholesterol conversation. And what LDL, HDL is like school buses or taxis that are taking certain fats to certain body parts. And what happened was, when they looked at the studies of people who lowered LDLs, it seemed to indicate that they had less cardiovascular disease. The issue was, and that was through the use of vegetable oils. But the problem was, when you take out something called metabolic dysfunction. What is that? This is the most important thing to me for my health, has been, is now, and always will be, is maintaining optimal metabolic function or insulin sensitivity. When we eat any foods, if we have a tremendously efficient system, it's going to take exactly the calories and carbs and fats, and it's going to send it to the right places. It's going to manage it so that you don't have inflammation, you don't have damage to the body, and it's kind of like a perfect thermostat that you would have on your house. So if you set it at 72 and it gets too hot, it's going to kick on. It gets too cold, it kicks back on with heat, and it's always going to keep it in this narrow range of 71, 72, 73. Well, that's what happens when you're optimally healthy and you have good metabolic function. But what happens when you don't is everything starts cascading down, from the inflammatory cytokines and the toxicities and the damage to the capillaries, and that creates old age. It creates falling apart. It creates weakness as we grow older. So my number one key in life is to maintain as level of blood sugar as I can and as low of insulin as I can, 10 and under on insulin blood testing. But what they did was, when you look at the studies of LDL, the people that it did extend the life of people who were metabolically dysfunctional or had very bad insulin. What it didn't do, it did not offer one single bit of assistance to those who are metabolically healthy. That means that a drug that causes sometimes great muscular discomfort, cognitive decline, there's no doubt, because it lowers something called coenzyme Q10. And coenzyme Q10 is how the body runs with energy, especially the heart. So you're taking a drug that makes numbers change on a piece of paper, obviously very aggressively, but it doesn't really extend lifespan. There's so many things that are coming to the surface that can show some change in today's time, but doesn't affect us long term in any positive manner. Now, one reason that traditional medicine will continue to promote this is because they have what's called standard of care medicine. If you go in there and your LDL is 140 and your cholesterol is 240, if they don't give it to you, they are subject to losing in a lawsuit. It's hard for them. I'm not saying that it is all their fault, because they really have their hands tied. But in the case of the true studies, the goal is to be metabolically healthy. How do we do that? To me, you do 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. You do somewhere between 70 and 200 healthy carbs a day. I do 60 Monday through Friday, then I go to the 200 on weekends. And then you do healthy fat. And what is healthy fat? Well, some of the healthy fats all to cook with, the only healthy fat is tallow, which is rendered beef fat, butter, ghee, coconut oil, and I use olive oil, but you can't really use that for cooking because it has a very fragile nature to that. What we don't want, and what is the demise of today's society, health-wise, I used to think it was sugar. Everybody in our industry, sugar is killing all of us. Hey, it's not healthy by far. If you do way too much, it's addictive. It will make you gain weight. But what was the mistake of that was that the sugar was packaged with something called seed oil. Seed oils are oils made from seeds. The problem is when manufacturers got onto this in about 1911, actually Crisco was the first company to start making seed oils. Before that, they were using butter and other healthy fats. And because of cost, it's so inexpensive to take these seed oils, which were useless before, but they have to run it through an extremely toxic procedures to pull oils out of this. They use hexanes and these forever chemicals, and they create this, what we call oxidized oil. What is that? Have you ever opened a bag of peanuts or nuts and they've been sitting in the counter or they've been in the heat and they're out of date? You feel this, you smell this rancidity quickly. It doesn't take long. Sometimes you might take a few seconds to taste it, but once you smell it, you know that it's gone rancid. Well, seed oils don't have that smell, but they truly are still what we call oxidized, which is another word for rancid. And these seed oils are devastating the health of this country. Seed oils are the most damaging molecule you probably could take in on a regular type of diet, and it's found everywhere. When you get a seed oil and you eat it, which we all have, I've had plenty of it, it is actually stored in the body for approximately 6 years. 6 years, that's how long it takes for the body, because it stores it in the fat cells and the organs and other places. And so it causes devastation, not for just one day. It causes it for years after years. And the only way to rid yourself of it is to eat less. That's it. There's no detoxing at the store and nothing else you can do to actually get rid of it except stop eating it. And that's what I've pretty much done. I've reduced my levels down probably to 95% reduction from what I used to be, because we now know that seed oils will be the reason, one of the biggest reasons for cardiovascular disease. So when we look at that cholesterol number and that LDL number, it only means something is if you are unhealthy in regard to your insulin, your sugar, your glucose levels, and I am massively connected to the value of what they call continuous glucose monitors. You pop them on here, you rent them for 2 months, and it will tell you exactly where these sugars are going as far as the rate of increase. I have never seen anyone who did not lose some weight if they needed it, feel better, figure out their trigger foods. One person, it was watermelon. That was the only food that jacked them up. Most people, it is rice or pasta, and breads, of course, desserts. But here's one clue that I learned myself over 20 years ago by doing the finger prick testing. If you eat a bowl of rice or a bowl of pasta by itself or a bowl of organic fruit, and you actually tested your blood sugar, there's a great chance that it will, if you're fasting or if your levels are about 90 on blood sugar, it could go all the way to 200 if you had a decent sized bowl, unless you add some healthy fat to it. This is one reason I eat healthy fat with every meal. If you added a tablespoon of butter, of olive oil, of tallow, ghee is just a type of clarified butter, um, you would be able to probably have 30% less blood sugar with that mixture. Nobody's telling you that. Nobody. And so I want to, impress on you how we need to plan our foods. And part of that planning, I eat out a lot. So the only thing I take with me is a small container of olive oil because I have to have healthy fat, and no restaurant hardly has it. So I encourage you to always try to do a good amount of protein, a good amount of healthy fat, not too excessive because it has calories, and then a modest amount of carbs. That alone, if you eliminate the canola, the corn oil, the soybean, the safflower, the peanut, the grapeseed, these are seed oils again. There's a wonderful, wonderful app you can put on your phone called Seed Oil Scout. This is where they do the best they can to determine which restaurants are using better choices, or at least give you the better choice of how do you want your food prepared. Because many of them have the word dine shamefully when you look up the restaurants. Many in Chattanooga do. I eat at Acropolis a lot in Portofino. They both have dine happily because you can go in and ask for no seed oils. I don't expect a restaurant to be perfect. There's no way. But I just want them to have options for myself. So we come back to the fact that, this cholesterol thing, there's actually a disease called Smith-Lambe-Opitz, and that is a congenital disease that you're born with that you cannot produce cholesterol. You know what happens to these kids? Neurologically, horribly cannot develop. Cognitively, they're struggling forever. They don't live a long time, and their immune system hardly works. So the value of cholesterol, we have to get out of this sugar philosophy of it's unhealthy, it's bad. It isn't. It's very healthy unless you are extremely unhealthy. So let's work on fixing the platform, fixing the engine, and not just trying to manipulate things to try to get to a better endpoint. And I thought of this analogy. I looked up, and I did not have any clue of this yesterday. I said, what is the number one reason for house fires? And do you know that 49% of all house fires and houses burning down, it's the stoves? Well, just imagine if all of a sudden we said, we're removing all the stoves in everybody's homes because of the dangers of having stoves. You see how asinine and ridiculous that is. So we're going to lower everybody's LDL with a drug that has tremendous side effects because we're going to lower a number that actually doesn't help a vast majority of people. Or if you are a candidate to be helped by statins, then let's work on the brokenness of that engine, which is metabolic dysfunction. Again, the process of how does your body take foods and process it into what we call ATP, which is the fuel that everything runs on, everything. So I'm a big egg eater. I'm more of an ancestral diet. I love that word. I used to use the word ancient diet, but ancestral, which is proving itself to me after seeing so many clients, the best that I've felt. I'm almost 68, less aches and pains because seed oils cause aches and pains. Let me tell you, I have 98% reduction in my aches and pains. I eat for really nutrition first, but I love eating my foods. It's very simple. I eat, a lot of healthy red meat. We sell a lot at Nutrition World. We also sell the tallow and the butter and all the best olive oil made and the coconut oil. And the meats that we have, we've investigated the farmers to a point that's ridiculous. So we know there's no vaccines and antibiotics and terrible foods being fed to them. And the issue with chicken is when a cow eats the worst of foods, which are corn and soy and grains instead of grass, they hardly turn much of their fats into what we call linoleic acid. That is what these are. Linoleic is a type of structure of the fat. Well, cow does very little of that, but guess what? A chicken and pig turns about 10 times more of that food into linoleic acid. And that is, again, what we're trying to stay away from is this certain molecule of fat. We want omega-3s and we want these healthy fats. We don't want polyunsaturated. And, a lot of people, they see the word on a bottle, vegetable oil. Well, that sounds pretty darn healthy. Anything for vegetables sounds like it should be good for us. Absolutely a myth, just like the sugar myth. So start reframing your brain to the fact of, I want to be able to have quality life. What if I don't live any longer, but I have the quality that I now have? It's worth every penny, but I really believe I will be living longer because of the habits that I have put into place. And again, I use nutraceuticals as a backup plan, call it the green pharmacy. But the knife and fork is still the most powerful weapon that you will ever have. And then exercise is 2 and nutraceuticals is 3. So getting the right blood work, your physician may or may not know how to interpret metabolic health, but we got to figure that out. You can always, Nutrition World has blood testing, a separate entity that you can do on your own. You want insulin, fasting insulin test at 10 and under. If you're at much above 15 and 20, you'll never lose weight because the insulin's job is to store food for later. That means you can work out with me every morning, you can eat like I do, and you may not lose but 2 pounds. But you get that insulin down to 10 and under, all of a sudden that exercise becomes super efficient. And not only that, the endothelial structure of the arteries, which is where plaque is formed, stops doing that. Because the reason plaque is formed is because there's an injury to the endothelial lining. What injures it? Seed oils. Seed oils. That is the biggest thing because they oxidize within the artery chamber. And when they do, then they start doing something like all my calluses on my hand. I have big old calluses because I do chin-ups. And the body repairs anything that's inflamed. Well, luckily, that certainly doesn't shorten my life. But it will if it's inside of an artery. So think about this from now on. Seed oils is the number one thing to stay away from and reduce by 90%. And the only weakness I have that has seed oils, there's only one. And that's when I go out to eat and I want a really good salad with a little bit of dressing. Dressings are 95% seed oils. That's all that's in them. Now you can buy some, super healthy dressings at Whole Foods and other places. I hadn't really found one I love. So I just use olive oil on most of my salads. But every now and then, that's the only one I give into, is to have that good old, a little bit of Thousand Island on a dressing. And I can't be perfect, but as long as we do 90% well, you don't have to worry about it. So there's your whole new class on, is fat healthy for our heart? Depends on which fat it is, but I think you got the idea now about what to choose and what's best for your future. And I always say, I separate the world into 2 classes of people, learners and non-learners. If you're watching at this point, you are a learner, and thank you, thank you, thank you.